Today's brief video is dedicated to anyone who's struggling to quit smoking weed, something that I struggled with and failed at many times after several years of active THC addiction. If you wind up enjoying the content in today's video, be sure to check out the pinned comment or the video description to download our free 7-step guide on how to quit smoking weed today. Throughout my life, especially throughout my life when I was in active weed addiction, I failed more times than I could count when I tried to quit. I constantly found myself saying, oh, I'll quit after I graduate college. I'll quit after I get a real job. I'll quit after I start this relationship. I'll quit after my birthday, after the new year. And time again, I would fail and I would fail and I would fail. And every time I failed, I started to feel a little bit more guilt and a little bit more shame. I was fairly hard on myself after each of my failures. Quitting weed wasn't the only thing in life that I failed at. Going back to high school, I miserably tanked on my SAT scores, which resulted in me not getting accepted into my top 3 college picks. Once I was in college, I was placed in remedial English and math. For any of you guys who follow our channel, you guys know my spelling is atrocious. Once I was in college, I failed organic chemistry 2 times. I failed medical terminology 2 times. I failed calculus 2 times. I failed physics 1 time. I failed exercise physiology 1 time. After struggling through college, failing my way through college, I actually failed my board exams. I'm a chiropractor, and I had to retake those exams twice before I finally passed. Now here I am, I graduated, and I have these really great business ideas for opening up a practice. And my first 2 ideas, 3 ideas really, failed terribly. I joke around and I say I even failed my life insurance physical examination. I even failed that. And throughout my life, I had been taught that failure was a really, really bad thing. And this mentality carried over into my addiction recovery journey. Every time I would say I was quitting and I would fail, that I would relapse, I would get so down on myself. And a large part of this is because society had taught me, it teaches us that failure's a bad thing, right? We learn this in school from a very young age. You fail a test, it's a bad thing. You fail at a work task, it's a bad thing. So it wasn't until I came across a business mentor of mine that was helping me open up my first private practice. And after failing 2 or 3 times at that, he said, you know, I'm not upset that you failed. In fact, I applaud your failures. He was like, anyone who gets the opportunity to celebrate success understands the sting of failure. It's the failures that make success possible to celebrate one day. And I coined that as the road to success is often paved in failure. And that can certainly be said about my quitting journey when it comes to weed. After having that conversation with that business mentor and understanding that failure was nothing more than a learning experience, not something to be ashamed of, not something to hide from, it completely changed my outlook on quitting. Moving forward, as I continued to screw up, as I continued to relapse, I started to pay attention. I started to pay attention as to what I did wrong, what I could have done differently, and how I could modify my behavior going forward. And this is really how I got out of the routine of beating myself up over my relapses when it came to my THC addiction. I started to embrace the failure as a learning experience versus an experience that would result in me just completely derailing the entire process. This, for me, has been undoubtedly one of the most valuable lessons that I've taken away from quitting various substances, nicotine, THC, energy drinks, and adult media content. I have become quite comfortable in my failure throughout my pursuit of success. And this mentality has transferred over to my businesses. This mentality has transferred over to my relationships. This mentality has transferred over to my faith. I've realized that failure is part of the process. And people who are successful at life in any endeavor, whether it's the pursuit of a relationship, the goal of entrepreneurship, opening a business, any endeavor is going to have failure. And it's people who can't manage failure, it's people who can't emotionally regulate failure that usually don't wind up doing well in life, because we're all going to fail at something. Because if you're not failing, you're not trying, you're not actually putting in an effort. Very, very rarely do we take on a task as monumental as quitting an addiction, or starting a business, or getting that perfect relationship without some degree of failure. And anytime you talk to anyone who is successful, they will tell you that their success has been paved with failure. And I think this is no different for most people in the addiction recovery and the sobriety space. So many times people get so down on themselves, and we beat ourselves up so much because we've been taught to do so. From a very, very young age and throughout all of adulthood, we've been reprimanded for our failures. And it wasn't until I got into business and I took this mentality that failure is an okay thing, and then I used it as a learning experience. It wasn't until I did that my life dramatically started to improve. So if you're really struggling to quit smoking weed, I challenge you today to shift your mindset. And I want to be clear about something. You know, I'm not talking about opioids. I'm not talking about fentanyl. I'm not talking about even alcohol to an extent. Some substances where if you relapse, it can result in death. Weed addiction, although I would say is just as serious of an addiction, typically it's not going to be, the consequences usually typically don't result in death. So although failure is something that I try and avoid, I've come to understand that it's part of the process, and it's an experience, and it's an emotion that I embrace. Because people who can embrace that emotion tend to do very, very well in life. If it wasn't for my quitting journey, if it wasn't for my failures, I don't think I would have the persistence and the grit that I have today when it comes to the success of my businesses, whether that's my chiropractic business, my YouTube business, my addiction recovery coaching business, our supplement line that we're starting. I've come to understand that failure is part of the process, and knowing that weed addiction knocked me down 10,000 times, but I got up on that 10,101th time, I know that I can do that again in my business. I know that I can do that again in my relationships. I know that I am capable of going through a failure, learning from that failure, and then modifying my actions and my behaviors to correct it going forward. So I don't judge you guys, those of you who are really, really struggling with this, those of you that have been following my channel for a long time and just can't seem to get it right. I get it. I've been there, and I applaud you for trying, because if you weren't failing continually, that either means you hit instant success, or it means you gave up. It means that you gave up on trying. And I would much rather see someone continually fail trying in the pursuit of a better life than giving up. So I don't judge you. I don't condemn you. I applaud you. And I'll end with this. I would encourage you to talk about your failures. I would encourage you to ask for help. I would encourage you to look for others who have gone through the experiences that you're going through and ask them what solutions they found. But just talk. Be open about it. The last thing you want to do is go into hiding and solitude and shame and guilt. That's what addiction wants you to do. That's what society has kind of taught us to do. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. I promise you that. If you wound up enjoying today's video, be sure to check out that pinned comment or the video description to learn more about our paid one-on-one addiction recovery coaching programs. As you can guess, we're very different from a 12-step program or something like that. Or just download some of our free resources, the 7-step guide to quitting smoking weed, the tolerance break checklist, or the 11 foundational pillars to recovery handout. I recommend downloading all our free content. It's awesome stuff. And all it does is it puts you on my email list. I write every email myself, and the emails have a lot to do with conversations just like this, shifts in mindset and things that can help you be more successful in the future. I'll see you guys later.